If you've followed modern politics for the past decade or two, you've probably noticed how the landscape shifts. For example, here in America in the past 10 years, we've been able to watch how the Democrats went from opposing gay marriage in Obama's first term to making their support for it a core part of their identity and platform. We've also seen the Republicans go through a ton of change as well, being totally remade in Donald Trump's image. It's really quite interesting to watch this happen in your lifetime in real time, instead of just reading about these shifts in textbooks. But if you've ever been a true observer of modern politics, especially if you're a Catholic or otherwise far right, you have hopefully noticed that conservatives don't conserve anything. If you don't understand what I mean, think about it. What have the conservative movements or political parties in America, but also in the West more broadly, preserved? Is America more religious now? More ethnically homogenous? Less feminist? Less gay? No. In fact, those things have only ever been less and less preserved. The truth is that conservatives are incapable of or unwilling to conserve our values and practices. The left has won every cultural and political battle that it has fought for the past 150 years at least, and it only continues to do so. This is not something that has only been noticed recently either. Robert Louis Daphne wrote in the early 20th century in regards to the conservative movements of his day, it may be inferred again that the present movement for women's rights will certainly prevail from the history of its only opponent, Northern conservatism. This Northern conservatism is a party which never conserves anything. Its history has been that it demurs to each aggression of the Progressive Party, and aims to save its credit by a respectable amount of growling, but always acquiesces at last in the innovation. What was the resisted novelty of yesterday is today one of the accepted principles of conservatism. It is now conservative only in affecting to resist the next innovation, which will tomorrow be forced upon its timidity, and will be succeeded by some third revolution, to be denounced and then adopted in its turn. American conservatism is merely the shadow that follows radicalism as it moves forward towards perdition. It remains behind it, but never retards it, and always advances near its leader. This pretended salt hath utterly lost its savour. Wherewith shall it be salted? Its impotency is not hard indeed to explain. It is worthless because it is the conservatism of expediency only and not of sturdy principle. It intends to risk nothing serious for the sake of the truth, and has no idea of being guilty in the folly of martyrdom. It always, when about to enter a protest, very blandly informs the wild beast whose path it essays to stop that its bark is worse than its bite, and that it only means to save its manners by enacting its decent role of resistance. This only practical purpose which it now subserves in American politics is to give enough exercise to radicalism to keep it in wind, and to prevent its becoming pursy and lazy from having nothing to whip. Here he nails the problem right on its head. The real reason why the progressives always win in the end is because conservatives don't truly fight back, and they eventually adopt the previous generation of progressivism's innovation as a principle of conservatism, and only resist whatever the left is pushing at that current time. And even then, their resistance is ineffective and has no genuine force behind it. They aren't truly willing to suffer for their beliefs, or exercise the power and force of will needed to implement change. They just bitch and moan about how the latest leftist cause is so evil, while holding the leftist cause of 15 years ago as a conservative value. And I understand that you might be tempted to think that conservatives are finally starting to win now that Donald Trump is back in office, and
the Republicans have swept everything. And while I won't deny that Trump is absolutely the better option in comparison to anything the Democrats have to offer, in truth, this administration will be better than the previous ones, and it will slow down the decline and the march to the left. But Trump is no right winger by any means. He is not a true right winger. And if you're looking for MAGA to save you, you will be sorely disappointed. The best example of this progression, in my opinion, is in regards to feminism. Republicans today are staunch second wave feminists. They believe in gender equality, the woman's right to work, divorce, and the spouses being equals, and that the previous system of patriarchy and male headship was oppressive and dehumanizing for women. They praised the first and second waves of feminism as good and noble efforts that were needed and changed society for the better, but they opposed third wave feminism. Anyone with any knowledge of history or proper Catholic, correct morality knows how laughably absurd it is for someone to claim that the second wave feminism is conservative, when Christian teaching is clear on the superiority of men, the importance of patriarchy, and the great evils of women in politics and at work outside the home. And the conservatives of generations past fought against the first wave of feminism, because when you look at the history of the Christian West, any feminism of any kind is an evil modernist revolution. But then in time, they accepted the first wave of feminism and fought against the second wave, until they eventually accepted that too. And now you have influencers like Megyn Kelly telling women that they can have it all, and so-called Catholics like Lila Rose urging women to work and hire nannies to look after their children. And if anyone on the modern right pushes against this and says that the true conservative position is that not even the first wave of feminism is acceptable, you are immediately and viciously henpecked by hordes of female conservatives and trads and their emasculated simp husbands as misogynistic and as someone who only sees women as property, which they are, but that's a discussion for another time, and who doesn't want women to have any freedom or rights to control what they do with their... Doesn't this all sound familiar? These are the exact arguments that leftists will use when you argue against some tenet of third-wave feminism. Only these aren't leftists saying it. These are supposed to be the conservatives. They're supposed to be the ones who reject all this stuff and preserve true traditional Christian morality. In reality, they're just whatever the left believes, minus about 10 to 20 years. The notion that Donald Trump and MAGA as a political movement are far right is so absurd that you couldn't possibly put its stupidity into proper perspective. They are to the left of first-term Barack Obama on gay marriage. A few months ago, Scott Presler posted a wretched image of him in bed with his male lover, claiming that if you weren't okay with two men being in bed together, you, quote, weren't a conservative. And sure enough, all the big MAGA accounts were supporting him and shaming anyone who pointed out this insanity. MAGA is the American right now, and the movement is openly pro-homosexuality, pro-transgenderism for adults, pro-civil rights, pro-feminism, pro-immigration, and has Dave I Buy Babies Rubin, Elon Musk, single mothers like Ashley St. Clair and Lauren Southern, and Blair White as some of its more prominent online faces. What the fuck are we conserving? Did conservatives ever conserve America's ethnic identity and freedom of association? Did they preserve the natural order between men and women? Did they preserve the economy or our culture? No, they have not conserved any of that. They have conserved absolutely nothing. Conservatism is fake opposition. It is whatever the progressives are, minus about 10 to 20 years, and is headed in the same direction as the leftists instead of pulling the opposite way. Within the next decade or two, conservatives will call you a transphobe for not respecting the pronouns of the trans kids, and will defend their rights to be mutilated, but will assure you that they will never yield ground to the left on the zoophile issue, because that is just too far. Just like how they never yielded to the left on feminism, abortion, gay marriage, immigration, civil rights, gun control, welfare, the economy, law enforcement, and divorce, right? If you seriously think they are done giving up ground for good this time, I have a lovely ski resort in hell to sell you. So then why does this keep happening? Why is conservatism so ineffective and unable to resist the left? Why does it keep conceding and adopting the left's innovations every single time? Well, it's because ultimately conservatives follow the ideology of liberalism, and they fundamentally misunderstand the nature of power and how it should be acquired and used. Liberalism is the core ideology of both the political right and the political left. Even the people on the left who are full-blown Marxists are still following an ideology based in and originating from liberalism and liberal principles. This is especially true for conservatives, who damn near worship liberal values and documents such as the Declaration of Independence and Constitution. Conservatives are deeply devoted to the ideals of personal freedom, independence, individualism, and equality, that they are unwilling to do or say anything that goes against those principles, because they are unwilling to betray these ideals that they hold sacred. The ideology they hold ultimately allows for all the stuff the left pushes to be acceptable, because the left always argues for these changes on the basis that people should have more freedom to live as they please, and that the state or other citizens of the country have no right to prevent them from living that way. And they are right. If someone is following this ideology faithfully, they will have to allow this stuff or go against their principles. So the conservative cannot make any true move against the progressive without making a hypocrite out of himself. Because of this, we constantly find ourselves in the great societal cycle. Step 1. The left introduces a new social reform they want. Examples include civil rights, feminism, gay rights, etc. 2. The right protests this change by arguing that it is harmful for society and or that it violates one of the original principles of liberalism. 3. The progressives argue that the conservatives have no right to prevent these people from having the freedom to live as they wish. And the conservatives inevitably cave in due to the aggression of the left and their inability to enforce their position, because that would violate their opponents' freedoms. 4. Social reform passes and is fully integrated in society in the decades afterwards. Conservatives who grew up in the world where such a reform was the norm, and who spent that time hearing the left's arguments for it from the liberal perspective, believed that the reform was good and should be conserved. 5. The left introduces a new social reform they want. 6. Repeat. This cycle has happened so many times over the course of our history. This is why Trump is considered the furthest right one can go by mainstream politics. It's because the Overton window has shifted so far to the left over literal centuries that Trump is seen as right-wing in regards to the current political landscape. Even 100 years ago, Trump would have been an undisputed radical leftist, and in the grand calculus of history, he is about as far from right-wing as anyone can get. Conservatism fails to conserve anything because the ideology it follows, liberalism, cannot justify denying the rights of whatever group that wishes to be normalized in society. By their own logic, they are forced to admit, yeah, we can't really stop you, even though we disagree, because that would be tyranny, and you have a right to your freedom. This is where mentalities like live and let live, and you can do what you want as long as you aren't hurting anybody, come from. When the strongest opposition the right can muster is, we think this thing is bad, but we won't stop you, and we'll actually fight for you to have the right to push for this stuff. Why would the left ever need to take them seriously, or factor them in, or try to compromise? Building a society where freedom, liberty, and equality are its core values is nothing but a way to enable people to pursue their worst impulses and selfish desires, because society and the state tell them they have the right to the pursuit of happiness. When you have a society like this that prioritizes personal freedom over the cultivation of moral virtue and the preservation of morality or the social order, arguing against these people who seek such freedoms on any of these bases is ultimately ineffective. Even if such people cared about the social order or moral virtue, those things come secondary to personal freedom and individualism, and conservatives know this more than anyone, which is why they always have to surrender and give in when they inevitably realize that the left doesn't give a damn about any of that. They just want the freedom. They just want to do as they will, and they should be allowed to do just that under the very system that conservatives hold most dear. Liberalism is an ideology that at its core has one central tenet: do as thou wilt. The second major reason why conservatives always lose is because they do not have the drive or desire to seize power and to wield it to change society. You can summarize the conservative view on power in a single sentence: the famous axiom, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Liberalism as an ideology is built around this very idea, believing that a good government should be designed to keep its other branches in check, so that no one authority should have too much control. Liberals believe that nobody can be trusted to rule justly when they are given power, and so seeks to give each individual or group as little power as possible, and the ability to curtail the actions of the other groups. It is because of this belief that conservatives avoid acquiring or exercising power of their own, fearing that if they push too far, do too much, they will be corrupted by the power they wield and become a tyrant themselves. And so conservatives don't typically desire to hold office. And if they do get elected, they will usually follow all the rules to the letter and treat their opposition with total fairness, as this is what the liberal system expects of them. They will not restrict their enemies, nor seek to silence them, and will defend their rights to operate if anyone else tries to do that. They will destroy people like Joseph McCarthy for the crime of trying to save his country from Marxist infiltrators. They refuse to gatekeep the institutions, and thus allow leftists to enter and rise through the ranks, who will then proceed to gatekeep the institutions against the conservatives. They refuse to exercise power, to enforce their viewpoints, and to crush their opposition. They refuse, quite frankly, to rule, and for that refusal, they have paid dearly. They lost everything to the left: the universities, the government, Hollywood, the culture, and even the religious and cultural heritage. The left understands that power does not corrupt, it only magnifies the good or evil traits of the person wielding it. The left also understands that the purpose of the acquisition of power is to use it to enforce the ideology that you believe in. The purpose of power is to be wielded by a ruler. This is why the left is so ruthless, why they force their rivals out of institutions, why they imprison their enemies, why they spend decades socially engineering the populace and infiltrating institutions. The left understands the liberal theory of political discussion, the notion that all sides have equal power and can freely discuss their ideas, and won't try to sabotage each other to gain power is fucking retarded. This system only works until you inevitably get a side that doesn't give a damn about being fair. Politics is a proxy for warfare. We engage in it because it is less destructive and deadly than warfare. The modern conservative liberal dichotomy is like a group of pacifists going into battle against the Spartans. They will be effortlessly ripped to pieces. It is our duty as Catholics to fight for our ideology to be the dominant one, for our God to be the one whose worship is allowed, and for any groups that seek to undermine or resist that vision to be destroyed. This is what it means to rule. This is what it's always meant to rule. And to believe otherwise is to be the pacifist who charges into battle and is confused as to why his comrades are being speared through the heart and turned into pincushions by arrow fire. After all, don't both sides just want what is best for the country? Conservatives will always be a losing movement as long as it holds to liberalism as its core ideology, and as long as conservatives refuse to use their power to rule. If you still insist on going down this path, get ready for more setbacks, more persecutions from the left, and to be called a transphobe by conservative pundits in 2040 when you use the wrong pronouns when discussing the Daily Wire's new 8-year-old trans podcast host. Is this the future you want? Aren't you tired of pretending like the left has any good ideas or redeeming qualities? Of pretending that our society is somehow better off because we allow these vermin to infest everything and spread their cancer through our culture? Are you sick of conservatives never doing anything of significance when they are in power, only for the left to take power back and change everything about your life? Are you sick of having to share a society with these animals, to look them in the eyes and tell them that they have the right to parade naked in your streets, groom your kids, tax you for everything you're worth, blaspheme your God, steal your job, and fill your homelands with foreigners who hate you and want to destroy everything your ancestors fought and died for? I know I do. I'm tired of pretending like these scum deserve anything more than being consigned to the dustbin of history. And if you feel the same way, you need to abandon liberalism and conservatism. You need to come home to Rome and embrace the truth of the Catholic faith and integralism, her holy political ideology. Until next time, I've been right about everything.
いつでも